Welcome to Deep Dive. Today, we're going really deep, maybe as deep as it gets. We're asking those huge questions about reality itself.
Yeah, not just, what we see or touch.
Exactly. But what is it, fundamentally? And importantly, what does that mean for us, for our place in it all?
It's a big one. We're diving into the work of Bernardo Castrip today, looking at analytic idealism. It's pretty groundbreaking stuff.
Right. His core idea, and we'll unpack this, is that consciousness isn't just something the brain cooks up.
Uh-huh. Like a side effect of complexity.
Yeah. Instead, he's saying consciousness is the foundation, the bedrock of all reality.
And that's a massive claim. It challenges, well, pretty much the standard view, doesn't it?
Totally. So we're going to look at why he rejects materialism so strongly, that idea that physical stuff is all there is.
And explore how his perspective, if you take it seriously, could really change how you think about science, sure, but also about yourself.
Your identity.
What meaning is all about, even, the big one, death.
And this isn't just abstract head-scratching. There are real thought experiments here, things you can chew on yourself.
For sure. And Castrip himself, for anyone new to him, he's quite a figure, known for really rigorous thinking, deep insights.
People describe him as subtle and wise. You get that sense reading his work.
Definitely. And many see him as really pushing forward a major shift in how we understand consciousness in the physical world, like a fundamental reevaluation.
And he's written a lot. Books like Decoding Jung's Metaphysics, Why Materialism is Baloney. Pretty direct title, that one.
Yeah, leaves little doubt where he stands. And meaning in absurdity. His work pulls together philosophy, neuroscience, psychology, even physics.
Which is important, right? It shows his arguments aren't just confined to one little box. They have to hold up across different fields.
Exactly. And these aren't just, armchair thoughts. His work is peer-reviewed, published in academic journals.
Which gives it weight, especially since his ideas often go against the grain. They challenge the mainstream.
Right. He's antagonistic to current mainstream views, as one description puts it. But he's doing it with serious, vetted arguments.
Okay, so let's get into it. Part one. The core claim. Consciousness as the foundation.
Right. So Castrip's central idea, put simply, is the universe is entirely mental.
Whoa. Okay. Mental.
Yeah.
Wow.
Meaning universal mind is the ontological primitive. That's the philosophical term for the fundamental stuff, the ultimate ground floor of reality.
So instead of tiny particles or energy fields being the base.
Exactly. Instead of matter, it's mind. Consciousness itself is the basic ingredient.
That really flips things around, because we usually think consciousness comes from the brain, right, inside our heads.
That's the standard view. But Castrip says, no, it's the other way around. It's your body-brain system that is in consciousness, not consciousness in your body-brain system.
What? Okay, hang on. Like a dream. In my dream, I have a body. Maybe I even think about my dream brain.
Precisely. But the whole dream, including your dream self and its dream brain, is happening inside your mind. Your mind is generating the dream reality.
Got it. So my physical brain isn't making the dream. My mind is making the whole scene, including the dream brain within it.
That's the analogy. Your brain is part of the content of consciousness, not the container for consciousness.
Oh, wait, does that mean, is he saying it's all just my dream? Like you're just a figment of my imagination? Solipsism.
Good question. No, definitely not solipsism. That's a common misunderstanding. Idealism, as he presents it, says mind extends far beyond the boundaries of personal introspection. Meaning other people, animals, they are genuinely conscious too. They aren't just characters in your mental movie. They are other centers of consciousness.
Okay, so it's not my mind alone. It's some kind of bigger mind.
Exactly. He often borrows Aldous Huxley's term, mind at large.
Yeah.
Think of it as this vast transpersonal consciousness underlying everything.
Transpersonal, like beyond individual personalities.
Right. It's the fundamental ocean of awareness. And each of us, our individual psyche, is like a whirlpool in that ocean.
A whirlpool. Okay. So we're distinct, we have our own spin, but we're made of the same water as the whole ocean.
That's the idea. We are localized expressions of this universal mind, separate, yet connected, and ultimately part of the same fundamental consciousness.
And this changes how we see, well, everything, even physics.
Absolutely. Because if reality is mental, then the dynamics of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, all that aren't just cold, mechanical laws operating on dead stuff.
What are they then?
They are constituted by the excitations of universal mind. They are, in essence, experiences themselves with inherent qualities. Nature is the ongoing experience of this universal consciousness.
So the universe isn't just matter and energy, it's feeling. experience.
In a fundamental sense, yes. It's imbued with qualities, with what it's like to be. It's not a dead machine. It's a living, dynamic field of awareness.
Wow, okay. That leads into another really interesting idea of the world as narrative or myth.
Yeah. He suggests that the bulk of the world is a collection of narratives experienced in mind according to linguistic patterns. He even says the world is made of myths.
That meaning it's fake.
Not fake, no.
Yeah.
More like symbolic, like a dream or a powerful story. It's not always literal, but it carries deep meaning. It's something to be interpreted, understood on a symbolic level.
Like reality itself is telling a story.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Or that its structure is story-like, narrative-like, inviting us to find meaning within it, rather than just measure its objective parts.
And this applies even to something as basic as time.
Definitely. He makes the pretty bold claim that there is only ever the present.
Only the present. But
Yeah.
what about yesterday or next week?
He argues that past and future exist only as mental explanations and predictions, images in the mind. When you remember the past, you're experiencing that memory now. When you anticipate the future, you're having that thought now. The actual experience always happens in the present.
Try it yourself. Have you ever left the present in your entire life? Can you actually step outside of the now?
Even thinking about the past or future, that thinking happens now.
Right. Or that thought experiment. Relive your first kiss. The feeling, the memory, the images, they all happen now, not in the past. The past event is gone. Only the present recollection remains.
It really makes you question what time is. St. Augustine had that famous quote, right? What then is time? If no one asks of me, I know. If I wish to explain to him who asks, I know not.
Yeah, it feels obvious until you try to pin it down.
And Castrip points out, if we can't even define it without using concepts like before or after, which already assume time, how can we be so sure it's this objective thing out there?
It sounds more like a way our minds structure experience, a narrative tool.
That's strongly suggested, yes. A cognitive framework, not necessarily an independent feature of reality itself.
And this relates to perception, too, how we see the world.
Absolutely. He says our belief in perceptual truth, that what we see is really out there, is contingent on the validity of a metaphysical abstraction, a world independent of consciousness.
Unpack that a bit. Metaphysical abstraction.
It means the idea of a world separate from mind is itself a mental concept, a hypothesis. We don't directly experience that separate world.
What do we experience then?
The only reality we can ever know is that of subjective experience. Your perception of a tree isn't the tree itself, it's your mind's construction based on sensory input. It's your experience of tree.
So the objective world is a model we build in our minds to explain our subjective experiences.
Essentially, yes. A very useful model, obviously, but still a model within consciousness, not something we access directly outside of it.
This sounds a bit like Carl Jung's ideas, too.
Very much so. Jung believed the physical world at large is invested with meaning, in a semantic sense, just as our dreams presumably are.
Semantic sense, meaning like language. Symbolic.
Exactly. The world isn't just literal stuff, it's symbolic, like a dream. We look at dreams and ask, what did that mean? Jung and Castrip suggest we can approach the waking world similarly.
Searching for the meaning embedded in it, not just the mechanics.
Right. Moving from a purely mechanical universe to one that's inherently meaningful, full of symbols waiting to be understood.
Okay, this is a huge shift, but it runs headlong into the dominant scientific view, materialism. Which brings us to Castrip's critique, why materialism is baloney.
Yeah, he doesn't mince words there.
Yeah.
The standard materialist view, just to recap, is that physical reality, matter, and energy is fundamental. Everything else, including mind, arises from that physical base.
Consciousness is what complex brains do.
That's the idea. But Castrip argues this view crashes hard against the hard problem of consciousness.
The hard problem around us.
It's the seemingly impossible task for materialism to explain how subjective experience, the feeling of warmth, the taste of an apple, the color red, the feeling of sadness could possibly arise from just arrangements of physical stuff.
Yep.
Neurons firing, chemical swapping.
You can describe the brain activity down to the last atom.
And you still haven't explained the feeling.
Yeah.
What its likeness of the experience itself. There's what he calls an abyssal explanatory gap.
A gap between the physical description and the subjective quality.
Exactly. He says, there is nothing about mass, charge, spin, or momentum in terms of which one could deduce what the warmth of fire feels like. You can't get redness from equations about wavelengths and neurons alone.
It seems like a different category of thing altogether.
It does. And Castrip criticizes materialism for its tendency to have contempt for direct experience. He even points to philosophers like Daniel Dennett, suggesting we might need to just ignore the first-person view to solve the problem.
Which sounds like ignoring the very thing you're trying to explain.
Pretty much. Like trying to understand music by just studying sound waves and ignoring the experience of hearing it.
He has that analogy about the painter, right?
Yeah, the painter painting a self-portrait and declaring himself to be the portrait. He argues materialism gets circular, trying to explain how abstractions of consciousness generate consciousness, meaning concepts like mass or energy are already concepts within consciousness. Using those concepts to explain the origin of consciousness is like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. It doesn't actually explain where the consciousness that uses those concepts came from in the first place.
Okay, so what about ideas like consciousness emerging? Like it just pops out when things get complicated enough.
He sees that as a cop-out or an appeal to magic. True emergence, he says, like snowflakes from water molecules, lets you deduce the higher-level pattern from the lower-level rules.
You can see how the snowflake shape follows from how water molecules behave.
Right. But with consciousness, materialists can't show how subjective feeling emerges from neural complexity. They just assert that it does. It's more of a label for the mystery than an explanation.
Like a promissory note saying, science will figure it out later.
Kind of, yeah. And then there's the even more extreme view, eliminative materialism.
Which says?
That consciousness, as we think of it, is just an illusion. It doesn't really exist.
Seriously, like my feeling of being conscious right now isn't real?
That's the claim. Castrip argues this is based on question-begging, conceptual obfuscation, and sleights of hand. Basically, denying the problem instead of solving it.
He uses that computer analogy, doesn't he? A program with conscious true.
Yeah, or John Searle's Chinese room thought experiment. Just manipulating symbols according to rules doesn't create real understanding or subjective experience. A computer running a consciousness program wouldn't actually feel anything.
It's just processing symbols.
Right, and the killer blow for Castrip is the Gödelian self-defeat.
Sounds intimidating. What's the idea?
It's simple, really. If your brain is supposedly creating the illusion that you're conscious and therefore can't be trusted about your own experience, then why should you trust that same brain when it concludes that consciousness is an illusion?
If the tool is unreliable for telling you you are conscious, it's equally unreliable for telling you you aren't.
Exactly. The claim undermines itself. You're using the allegedly flawed instrument to declare its own output, consciousness, flawed. It's logically incoherent.
Okay, so materialism has big problems. What about other ideas like panpsychism, the idea that even tiny particles are conscious?
Yeah, panpsychism suggests that consciousness isn't limited to brains, but that maybe even electrons have some rudimentary form of experience, something it feels like to be an electron.
Trying to bridge the gap that way.
Right, but Castrip argues it just swaps one hard problem for another. The subject combination problem.
Which is?
How do all those little bits of consciousness, billions upon billions of conscious electrons and quarks in your brain, somehow combine or merge into the single, unified, complex consciousness that you experience?
How do tiny sparks become one big flame?
Essentially. He says that combination process is unexplainable, perhaps incoherent, and just as hard as explaining how consciousness arises from non-conscious matter in the first place.
It doesn't solve the core mystery.
And he also has issues with how it explains individual minds. Yeah, he argues panpsychism seems to imply experience is smeared out across space-time, making it hard to understand why we have distinct, private, individual experiences that aren't all blurred together.
If everything's a little bit conscious, why aren't we all just one big conscious soup?
Right. How do clear boundaries form? So ultimately, he sees panpsychism as an attempt to make materialism work, a way to patch up the old paradigm rather than embracing a genuinely different one like idealism.
Okay, so if materialism is out and panpsychism doesn't quite cut it, what is the brain doing, according to Castrip, if it's not generating consciousness?
This leads us to one of his most central and, I think, intuitive ideas. The brain as a filter. The filter hypothesis.
A filter? Filtering what?
Filtering the broader mind at large.
Yeah.
The idea is that universal consciousness is vast, maybe infinite, and the brain acts to limit and localize that consciousness into our specific individual point of view.
So consciousness is already there everywhere, and the brain just tunes into a small part of it.
Kind of like that. His main metaphor is the whirlpool in a stream.
Right, you mentioned that. The stream is mind at large.
And the whirlpool is the individual psyche, localized by the brain-body system. The body-brain system is merely what the whirlpool looks like from the outside.
Okay, see. The whirlpool is a pattern in the water, not something making the water.
Precisely. So to say that the brain generates mind is as absurd as to say that a whirlpool generates water. It confuses the appearance with the substance.
Or his lightning analogy.
Yeah, lightning is merely how atmospheric electric discharge looks, not the cause of it. Lightning is the visible effect, not the source of the electricity. The brain is the visible effect of localized consciousness.
So when neuroscientists see brain activity correlating with thoughts or feelings,
They're not seeing the cause of the thought. They're seeing the partial image or the coded representation of the conscious process itself as it appears from an outside perspective.
the brain activity is the thought, viewed from the outside.
It's the footprint of the thought in the physical-looking realm, yeah. The correlation is there because the brain is the interface, the localization mechanism, not the generator.
Okay, that makes sense as a concept, but is there actual evidence for this filter idea?
Well, Castrip argues there's quite a bit, often phenomena that materialism struggles to explain. Think about near-death experiences, NDEs.
Right. People report incredibly rich experiences.
Often life-transforming insights, emotions, and inner imagery far richer than ordinary experiences.
Precisely when their brain function is severely compromised, like during cardiac arrest.
Exactly. If the brain makes consciousness, how can consciousness become more vivid and complex when the brain is shutting down? It's the opposite of what you'd expect.
Yeah, it's a major challenge for materialism. What else?
Psychedelic states. Studies using things like psilocybin show significant increase in the richness of experience. Complex visuals, profound insights.
Yet, brain scans often show reductions in overall brain activity in key areas.
Again, counterintuitive for the brain as generator model. But it fits the filter model perfectly. Reduce the filtering activity of the brain, and more consciousness floods in.
Like opening the aperture wider? Ram Dass's quote about death being like removing a tight shoe?
Yeah, it captures that sense of release, delocalization, expansion beyond the tight confines of the normal brain filter.
Then there's acquired savant syndrome. This one seems even weirder.
It's fascinating. These are cases where severe brain damage from strokes, head injuries, even dementia doesn't just cause deficits.
What happened?
People suddenly develop genius-level skills in arts, math, and other areas they never had before. Skills appearing after the brain damage.
That seems impossible if the brain creates ability. Damaging it should only break things, right?
That's the materialist assumption. Sam Harris famously questioned it, like, should a few hammer blows make someone a spiritual genius? Is that the world we live in?
And Castrip says.
Yes. Because if the brain is a filter, sometimes damaging the filter can remove inhibitions or limitations, allowing access to abilities or knowledge perhaps inherent in mind at large, but normally filtered out.
So the genius wasn't created by the damage, it was unleashed.
That's the filter hypothesis explanation. The damage reduced the filtering, opening a channel to something broader.
Are there other examples, ways to potentially loosen this filter?
He points to various technologies of awareness expansion. Things like holotropic breath work, designed to access unconscious material by altering brain state.
Oh, ancient practices.
Yeah, like sensory deprivation in caves used by the Greeks to seek insights, or Sufi dervish spinning to induce trance, intense prayer, deep hypnosis.
Diverse methods, but maybe a similar outcome.
He suggests they all lead to similar transcendent experiences, pointing towards a common mechanism, temporarily reducing the brain's filtering function to allow access to broader states of consciousness.
Okay, so the brain as filter seems to explain some puzzling data. This leads us to rethinking reality itself, doesn't it? The idea of an objective world.
Right. If consciousness is fundamental and the brain filters it, what does that say about the world out there? Castrip argues that this idea of an objective world independent of consciousness is just that, an idea, a hypothesis.
Because
Because the only reality we can ever know is that of subjective experience. We never directly touch an objective world outside our own perception.
we only ever experience our experience of the world.
Precisely. The physicist Andre Lin said it well. Our knowledge begins not with matter, but with perceptions. We soon forget, and say that matter is the only reality.
We mistake our mental model for the reality itself.
Reify the abstraction, yeah. And this is where modern physics, especially quantum mechanics, comes in quite strongly on the side of idealism, according to Castrip.
How so? Quantum mechanics seems pretty weird, but how does it support idealism?
Because QM, fundamentally challenges the idea of an objective reality existing independently of observation. It has rendered all but untenable the notion that there is anything objective at all.
The observer effect.
That's a big part of it. Experiments consistently show that observation not only determines the world perceived at present, but also retroactively changes it. The properties of a quantum system, like an electron's position or spin, do not exist prior to being observed.
They're not there until looked for.
In a sense, yes. As Anton Zeilinger put it, there is no sense in assuming that what we do not measure have an independent reality. Some scientists even concluded the universe itself doesn't objectively exist independent of observation, quantumly speaking.
Headlines like, "Quantum physics says goodbye to reality."
They reflect this profound challenge. It's not just small particles. It suggests reality itself is participatory, co-created by observation.
And there's contextuality, too.
Yeah, that's another blow to objectivity. Classically, measuring one property shouldn't affect a separate, simultaneous measurement. But quantum mechanics shows it does.
Measuring A changes the outcome of measuring B, even if they seem separate.
Exactly. Numerous experiments confirm this. What you find out about a system depends on the context of measurement, what else you're measuring. Properties aren't fixed and independent, they are relational.
Which leads to ideas like relational quantum mechanics.
Right. Carlo Rovelli's RQM takes this seriously, stating there are no absolute, that is, observer-independent physical quantities. Everything is relative to the observer.
So reality isn't one fixed thing everyone sees the same way.
RQM suggests each observer is inferred to inhabit its own physical world, defined by their interactions and observations. And this strange idea has actually been experimentally supported. Reality is constituted in relation.
Okay, but the obvious question comes back. If reality is mental, in consciousness, why can't I just think things into existence? Why can't I change the laws of physics with my mind?
That's a fair challenge. Castrip's answer is straightforward. Not all mental activity is acquiescent to volition. Just look at your own mind.
Right. I can't control my dreams. I can't stop annoying thoughts sometimes.
Exactly. Our own inner mental world isn't fully under our conscious control. So the fact that the external world also isn't under our control doesn't prove it isn't mental. It just proves it's not under our individual mental control.
It's part of that larger mind at large, which has its own ways.
Yes. Universal consciousness might not have a specific plan we can override. It might just operate according to its innate disposition, like instinct.
Like birds building nests, instinctively regular, predictable, but not a conscious decision each time.
That's the analogy. The laws of nature could be the regular, predictable habits or instincts of universal mind, not external rules imposed on dead stuff.
And our human will.
Our volition is dissociated from that larger flow. We're like an eddy in the stream. We have our own local spin, but we don't control the whole river. Our personal will operates within the larger mental reality that doesn't dictate it.
Okay, wow. This changes everything. How we see ourselves, meaning death.
It really does. Let's start with identity. Who are you, really? Try that exercise. Ask, who am I, and peel away the answers.
Am I my name? No, that's just a label. My job, that changes. My body. That changes constantly, too. My memories, they fade, they shift.
Keep going. Strip away your history, your genetics, your roles. What's left?
Just the sense of I, the awareness that's watching all this.
Exactly. Castrip calls it the amorphous eye. It's fundamentally independent of any story. Entirely undifferentiated and identical in every person. It is formless.
Yeah.
It's the pure subject, the background awareness.
So this underlying I is universal.
That's the implication. And our individual personalities, our egos, they are split-off complexes of the one medium of mind.
Like alters in dissociative identity disorder. DID, that sounds extreme.
It's a strong analogy, but he uses DID empirically too. Remember, the study showing different alters can have genuinely different physiological states, like the blindsided woman.
Yeah, validated by brain scans, showing distinct conscious centers can exist in one psyche.
So the idea of us being individual alters of the universal mind at large becomes more plausible. We're distinct localizations, each with our own perspective within the one underlying consciousness.
And our ego's job is
to order and organize the chaotic substrate of nature according to its own rules. It creates structure, categories, makes sense of the raw flow of experience through its specific lens.
And this ties into Jung's idea about self-reflection being the meaning of existence.
Yes, that human self-reflection brings meaning and existence into being. Without consciousness reflecting on the world, interpreting it, finding meaning in it, the universe would just be Perhaps, but it wouldn't mean anything.
A gigantic, meaningless machine, as Jung put it. We are how the universe understands itself.
That's a powerful way to see it.
Yeah.
We are nature's way of groking itself. Our awareness gives the whole process significance.
Which contrasts sharply with materialism, where meaning is often seen as purely subjective, something we just invent.
Right. Idealism suggests the world is inherently invested with meaning, like an open book waiting to be deciphered. Meaning is there to be discovered, not just projected.
Like interpreting a dream, the meaning feels inherent in the dream symbol.
Exactly. The physical world itself becomes symbolic, a form of symbolic language attempting to point at something else.
And that something else might be asking us.
Maybe asking, here is consensus reality. Can you figure out what it really means? Like the universe is posing a riddle through its very existence.
And maybe we humans are nature's best shot at coming up with the answer.
Because of our capacity for self-reflection, yeah. Without us, the universe might remain fundamentally unaware of its own depth and meaning.
This also changes how we might view things like religious myths.
Definitely. Instead of dismissing them as primitive science or mere fantasy, Castrip suggests many religious myths reflect a culture's intuitive apprehension of transcendent aspects of reality.
They're symbolic expressions of deeper truths.
Perhaps the most direct and accurate utterance of transcendent truths that logic and literal language can't capture. Which leads him to a pretty bold idea.
Which is?
He proposes that if a religious myth resonates deeply with your inner intuitions, then you should emotionally, though not intellectually, take it on board as if it were literally true.
Whoa, not intellectually, but emotionally.
Yeah, engage with its symbolic power, its archetypal truth on a feeling level. He's not saying believe impossible things literally. He's saying connect with the meaning conveyed by the myth as if it were profoundly real.
Why? What's the benefit?
He thinks it allows for genuine transcendence and meaning without falling into rigid fundamentalism, and it helps avoid the opposite trap, amantic nihilism, the feeling that nothing means anything. It's a path between blind faith and empty meaninglessness.
Interesting. A way to harness the power of myth without literalism. Okay, let's turn to the ultimate question, death. How does idealism change that?
Radically. The fear of death is largely tied to the materialist idea that consciousness is the brain. So when the brain dies, poof, you're gone. Annihilation.
Lights out.
Right. But if consciousness is fundamental, the ground of being within which birth and death happen.
Then consciousness itself can't be born or die.
Exactly. Neither birth nor death can bear any relevance to the existential status of consciousness itself. The screen doesn't die when the movie ends. The ocean doesn't die when a wave breaks.
So death isn't annihilation. What is it then?
A delocalization or declenching of consciousness. That removing a tight shoe analogy again. A release from the filter.
What happens after that release?
He speculates. Maybe a fallback onto a deeper level, a meta-demon, retaining some individuality but in a broader form. Or maybe a return to a completely undifferentiated state, merging back into the ocean fully, like Schopenhauer's One Eye of the World, or Jung's ultimate self, the collective unconscious, maybe even God.
Becoming part of the universal awareness again.
Perhaps. And he offers that provocative thought experiment. Have you ever noticed that only other people die, never you?
That sounds strange. Of course I haven't died yet.
It's not meant literally about past events. It's about subjective experience. You experience others passing, but your awareness, your sense of I, is the constant. You never experience your own absence. It's meant to jolt you into seeing mortality from the inside out, from the perspective of ever-present awareness.
To feel that continuity of consciousness underneath it all.
Something like that. An ineffable insight, he calls it. And this all loops back to practical things too, like health.
How does idealism relate to health?
If the body is the outside image of non-egoic psychic activity, the appearance of our deeper mental states, then your physical health isn't merely connected to your psychic state, it is your obfuscated psychic state. Illness isn't just physical, it's a manifestation of deeper psychic dynamics.
The mind-body connection taken to its ultimate conclusion. They aren't connected, they're two views of the same thing.
Exactly. Which opens up truly integrative mind-body medicine, treating the body by working with the underlying, often unconscious psychic patterns.
But not just positive thinking.
No, he emphasizes it's deeper than superficial ego stuff. It requires diving into the cellar of our personal psyches, dealing with the hidden complexes and energies manifesting as physical issues. Real inner work.
And memory, too. Not stored in the brain.
Under idealism, memory isn't like data bits stored chemically. It's more like ongoing but obfuscated experiences in the periphery of the psyche. Remembering is accessing that ongoing mental process now.
And the brain traces, the neural correlates.
They're the partial images of that accessing process, how it looks from the outside. The brain is the retrieval mechanism, perhaps, but not the storage vault itself.
So pulling all this together, analytic idealism presents a really different picture of everything.
It really does. Castrip argues it's a more complete, reasonable, parsimonious, and skeptical worldview than materialism. It could explain things like consciousness, NDEs, maybe even quantum weirdness that materialism has to ignore or hand-wave away.
Parsimonious means simpler, right? How is everything is mind simpler than everything is matter?
Simpler in terms of fundamental entities. Materialism needs matter, plus somehow explain the emergence of mind. Idealism just needs mind, and then explains matter as a pattern within mind. One fundamental substance, mind, versus two, matter and mind, or one plus magic, magically producing mind.
Okay, I see the logic there. It eliminates the hard problem by making experience fundamental.
Exactly. And this isn't just intellectual gymnastics. He presents it as a concrete and sound step forward, a way to reinterpret reality and gain real insights into life, the universe, ourselves.
It offers a framework where meaning isn't an illusion and maybe death isn't the end.
Right. It provides potential answers, or at least different ways of asking the biggest questions.
So the final thought to leave everyone with, really mull over. If reality truly is mental at its core, if your own consciousness is a kind of whirlpool in this universal ocean of mind, how does that change things for you?
Yeah, how does it reshape how you look at your daily life?
Yeah.
Your problems, your goals, your connection to others, to nature, your whole sense of who you are and what this is all about.
What new questions pop up when you start looking through that lens? It's definitely something to sit with, a profound shift in perspective.